Hi, I'm Rachel Olson, founder of Best Mom Products, where mompreneurs share their adventures in business. Today I'm talking with Rebecca Kaykas-Wolff, founder of Petit Couture, luxury clothing line for children. The expert advice she received early on that helped lead her down the path of success from trunk shows into retail stores. Does that sound right, Rebecca?
That sounds great.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah, well, welcome. I'd like to get started today. Maybe you could just tell our viewers and listeners how and when did this idea come to you?
So I had the benefit of, quite frankly, being on my third maternity leave when I had the opportunity to actually do something about the idea that I had had since my first daughter was born about 9 years ago at this point. And I was on maternity leave and was sitting at a park with a friend of mine at the time, and we were talking about, gosh, if we could only do something, what would it be? And we both discovered that we shared an interest in children's clothing, and we had come up with the same name. And so that just seemed kind of like kismet, and so it prompted me to actually do something about it. And so Petit Couture was conceived of about 3.5 years ago in Seattle when our family was living there, and we primarily started with trunk shows.
Maybe tell us a little bit about your background. What were you doing when you were on maternity leave?
Sure. So nothing to do with the children's apparel space, that's for sure. My background from a resume standpoint and what I've done professionally for over 20 years is that I'm a digital marketer. And so I was running the Safeco or Liberty Mutual web activities in the U.S. at the time, and I just was on maternity leave. Prior to that, I worked for companies like Microsoft and T-Mobile, driving a lot of their marketing and brand marketing as well as digital marketing initiatives.
Okay, so you had a strong background then in brand marketing. So did you think that doing something like this would come fairly easy to you?
You know, it's kind of funny because I think that early on I had a nice little peppering of ego and bravado, and so I thought, gosh, how hard can it be to start a children's apparel line? And the joke's on me because it's really hard. And but you're right, what I did know how to do was build a brand. I knew how to define kind of the segment that I was looking for, define kind of the value proposition of the type of company that I wanted to have. And my favorite pastime is that I'm a complete clothes horse. And so I love fashion, and it just kind of blended all of the things that I really liked.
The first product that you created?
We created the brand, and so because that's kind of where my background came from, we decided to, like on the apparel side of the business, there's two things that you can kind of create. You can create a t-shirt line, kind of a screen-printed t-shirt line, or you can create kind of original cut-and-sew pieces. Quite honestly, I didn't really know how to do original cut-and-sew at the time, and so we started with defining what the brand was, what the logo was going to be. We knew what it wanted to stand for, the business and the company, and so we went through an iterative process together to come up with basically the owl concept. We were looking for something that was wise, whimsical, and had kind of a hint of flair associated with it. And so if you take a peek at our logo, and so hopefully we can post it along with this, so if you take a peek at our logo, the owl is basically this great little creature, but his body has this pixelated damask component, and so it's kind of an eye towards not only kind of classic and timeless design, but something with a modern edge as well. So that's what we did first.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about the manufacturing process then, because if you didn't really know, I remember when we talked previously, you said the first thing you did was even Google apparel manufacturer.
So yeah, so the funny thing is that, like I said earlier, is that, you know, I thought, gosh, how hard could it be? You know, they're little tiny clothes. And, but I really did. I Googled apparel manufacturer, and so I just started from the ground up. And what we decided to do early on is essentially embellish blanks, which is what a lot of t-shirt line companies do kind of out of the gate. And that is, you buy styles or bodies from companies like American Apparel, or, you know, there's a litany of other ones that you can buy through screen printing companies, so that traditionally will do logo wear for, you know, baseball teams or for company parties. not really different than that. And so what we did is I basically set up wholesale accounts so I could buy the blanks myself, and then started to design on top of those, starting to figure out kind of what kind of textures and treatments wanted to do, what kind of Pantone colors or ink colors that we wanted to use, any kind of extra fabrication or trim elements with it. And then I found a really tremendous screen printing company in Oregon and started to source and print with them, and went through the process of making even our own custom inks that were water-based and organic, as well as some embellished inks and dye treatments that had glitter components in it that wouldn't come off, that kids would love because of the tacky kind of cool feel. And, you know, that was a process that I did, and I think it took me about 6 months to arrive at the processes that we have now.
Wow, that's incredible, because so much goes into that. And as you're learning about it and you're trying to determine what colors you want, who guides you in this process? Did the manufacturer? Are you finding this stuff on your own? How is that?
You know, it's a great question. So the manufacturer could guide me on kind of the chemistry involved in the screen print process, because they're essentially chemicals that you're putting on garments, and especially for children's clothing, there are a lot of regulations. So it's a very, very highly regulated enterprise. So there were things that we just couldn't do because the chemical compounds were just too great. So that was what they kind of lent to the process. I took a step back and I started to research fashion silhouettes, what kind of colorways were coming out for spring and fall, because there's essentially, you know, two major markets that come out every year. There's kind of a fall and winter color palette and silhouettes that come out, and then there's spring and summer with a color palette and silhouettes. And usually companies work about 12 months in the background. And, you know, I happen to have some friends that she was a buyer at Nordstrom in the women's wear area. And she helped me understand what their purchasing and design time frame was like. And then she actually pointed me in the direction of some companies that did trend forecasting.
Oh, interesting. So there's companies that just do trend forecasting. And is this do the same colors and silhouettes apply? I mean, children has to be one area, and then like adults is different.
Usually children. So the luxury with children is that, you know, I would say that the children's wear market is at least a season or even a year out from kind of women's wear, and women's wear kind of dictates all of the trend. Oh. And so when you're looking at trend forecasting, you know, and you wonder, gosh, why does every designer have the same denim out this season, you know, or the same shade of coral? Why is coral the new it color, which it is right now? Right. So you see it from Sephora to Gap to J. Crew to Yves Saint Laurent. Like, you see all of these different shades of coral. It's because about a year and a half ago, trend forecasts helped to dictate what those colorways were going to be. And then businesses like Pantone get involved. So not only do you see it on the print side of the design world, but then you also see it in custom fabrics and apparel. So this is something that, you know, quite frankly, I would just hunt and peck and find information. I mean, I'm a really good researcher, and I did a lot of reading after the kids were in bed. So I learned a lot really fast. But like I said, you know, that we did it really basically at first, and that was just to launch a brand. And you know, early on, I was kind of made fun. I was the owl girl when I would go and talk to buyers, because it's all I had. And I had a brand. And at the same time I was trying to build that brand, I was learning. I was kind of teaching myself without going to design school or fashion school. I was just kind of teaching myself.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Did you have mentors or take classes? Or did you just research online? I
didn't. You know, it's luckily I'm pretty scrappy, and I always have been, but you know, I had a newborn and 2 other kids, and my husband was living and working in another state, and so I had a lot of time on my hands after 8 p.m. And honestly, I built and designed a lot of what Petit Couture is between the hours of 8 a.m. and 1, or 8 p.m. and 1 a.m. Oh. So that is kind of what my world looked like, because that was the time that I had. Yeah. And then I went and I talked to local retailers, and I really started to pay attention, because fashion is always what I loved. I really didn't pay attention to what the trends were. And honestly, I just kind of became a really good merchandiser and shopper. And I think that when you're just interested in something, it kind of comes more easily.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Now, did you come up, so the owl design, so did you come up with that on your own? Like, did you draw that out, or did you hire somebody to do that?
No, I came up with the brand and kind of the tenets that it needed to be classic and whimsical with some modern elements to it too, and that those might sound like they're counterintuitive. Knew that we wanted a wise creature to kind of embody that. Thought about birds, but an owl just kind of resonated. Then did some research about, were there any, knew that we weren't just going to purchase line art, we were going to design something, and I had a really tremendous illustrator contact in New York who has his own illustration business. And I hired him and basically gave him the PowerPoint deck that I created about the brand with some sample visions with textures and colorways, just to give kind of that kind of a color swatch approach and a feel to the brand. And within 2 cycles, we were done.
Wow. Yeah, so because I'm not as familiar with it, what is the difference between an illustrator and a graphic designer?
So I think in a nutshell, an illustrator works in kind of vector-based images, meaning they're coming up with things that are not moving necessarily. And don't quote me, but when I was working with our illustrator, he would do free flow, so he would actually draw things out.
Okay.
Right? So he's also got that ability.
Okay.
He is a graphic designer, but then there are other kinds of graphic designers on top of it that do, graphic animation work and kind of 3D rendered work as well.
Okay, so I want to go back. Thank you for that. I want to go back. You said embellished blanks, and then you had also told me that there's cut and sew products. So could you just explain what the differences are for people who are listening? Because you're very seasoned on this, and I think that some people who are going to be watching or interested in listening are going to be trying to figure out how to do this, and so if that would be helpful, I think, to them.
Sure. I was so overwhelmed at first. So what you can do is if you're just going to first start out, and I think that this is a really great rule of thumb, is if you just want to start out and test some concepts, it's really expensive to do original designs through cut and sew processes. And what cut and sew is essentially is that you're buying yardage. You're either buying it through wholesale mechanisms, or you're going to a fabric store, right, and sampling that way. But you're literally cutting out patterns and then either sewing it yourself or hiring somebody to sew it. And so there's a manufacturing process involved. And that also includes all of the finishing work, like labeling and any other tags or embellishments or packaging elements that go into that. And that's an expensive endeavor, because not only are you sourcing all of the trim elements like buttons and zippers, if you've got those components, or even if you were going to do a onesie, right, or a one piece, you've got the trim or the pieces like that are snaps, right? And so you've got to source those components all separately, and in addition to the yardage. And so even before that process, you hire, or you either do it yourself or you hire technical designers, which can create what's essentially called a tech pack that shows all of the ranges in sizing, how much yardage you're using per size, what the grading is per size, meaning the size variance, and basically all the technical attributes for sewing. Right, and this is a very technical process. It's basically a huge Excel spreadsheet with a swatch of your item, indicated in that bill of materials, and then you hire basically a manufacturer to cut and sew, and then there's finishing on top of that, which could be labeling or packaging and all of that. So it's a much more involved process, and in order to really get a good economy of scale there, you have to have volume, because everything costs money. And so it's tough. It's been tough for Petit Couture, as it is now, to sustain and keep going with that for every season's release. I typically run sample runs, which are smaller, they're more expensive, and then I sell through, and then I keep cutting kind of custom orders, because you run into financing challenges, and that you really have to finance large production runs and making sure that you've got a business line of credit or whatever else it might be. So, when you get into that world, your mechanics of your business need to change.
Okay, yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about that and the financing. So if anybody goes to a manufacturer, what are they going to tell you? Like is a sample run a certain number of pieces that you have to run?
So there's a couple of phases. Usually you will do an initial sample run of maybe 1 to 2 pieces in 2 different sizes that are kind of at opposing ends of your sizing grading. So you can kind of see what a size 2 will be as opposed to a size 10. Okay. And see whether or not your grading and consistency makes sense. Then, after you agree that everything looks good and do some tweaks, you typically roll out your sales sample pieces. And so that can be anything from, like, for a small business like mine, it's probably 6 to 8 size per style and color.
Okay.
So, but it's still expensive when you're writing the check yourself.
Right.
Those samples go out to, like, I keep some go out to editors for publications. So you want to make sure that, like, all the trade press can have your stuff when they're doing a call. Like if they're doing a polka dot motif in May, and you've got something that's polka dot, you want to make sure that they can have your item.
Okay, start focusing on the marketing. I know that that's a huge strength, and I just want to back up. So when you say what the editors are doing, how do you find out about this? Did you hire a publicist? Did you can you research the editorial dates and what they're going to be looking for on your own?
Sure. So for the first 2.5 years, I did it all on my own. And so I researched, quite honestly, I trolled Facebook for other children's apparel businesses. I would find other designers and, quite frankly, see what they were up to, because everybody posts, like, where they are in the trade press. And so I looked to the brands that I really respected, and I found out who they were in, and basically found the editors that way. And then I found their editorial calendars, because all of that stuff is pretty publicly available, because they want to source as much information as they can. And so I had, I would say, moderate success doing that myself. I knew how to pitch things. That wasn't the issue. The issue was I was really brand new, and I really didn't have the contacts at that time.
Okay.
And so it was little by little that I was able to establish some contacts, and I did some very early blog interviews, kind of like this, except in print. Mm-hmm. And then, quite honestly, I used a lot of sales samples and used the mompreneur blogging community. And I went the review circuit for the first 1.5 years and had reviewers with kind of over, 8,000 unique users, and that had a brand that was on the higher end of things. Mm-hmm. I had them review, and that's how I actually garnered press earlier on, and then that would lead to other opportunities. So I'm just a firm believer in kind of taking advantage of what you have available. It also provided me an opportunity to learn, like, what was I good at, what was I not good at, what did I like doing, what did I not like doing, and how to work with in this new world, because I was really adept at launching big brands with different types of budget.
Yeah.
But doing it all yourself is a completely different beast.
Right. You have to be, as you said before, kind of scrappy. And the mom bloggers, so that's interesting. So when you reached out to the mom bloggers to review your product and they reviewed it, were you sending them samples for free at that time?
I was at the time.
Okay.
That's kind of you're paying for PR.
Right.
And that's the payment. And they have a business to run too, and that's kind of the agreement. But I think I learned early on that some were worth it, and others weren't. Just like in every industry, you're going to have people that are really good at their craft and some that aren't. And so, I learned a lot, and I made some mistakes, absolutely. And but whenever anything was published, then inevitably several more bloggers would pop up. I really didn't have to go find anybody after a certain amount of time.
To a degree, went viral in the mom blogging world. Is that?
It did earlier on, and those were in the earlier. It's kind of funny to think 3.5 years back, but that was the earlier days of Facebook. and the early days of Twitter. And so earlier on, I was able to kind of capitalize on some of that because I was a digital marketer. The technology didn't really bother me. And I kind of knew how to utilize all of that, and I knew how to push out digital images. I also, from a marketing perspective, early on shot some really amazing photography with a Seattle photographer and used her for, I think, 2 to 3 different photo shoots. And her images just built the credibility. It just lended an additional layer of credibility to the brand, even though at the time we were selling 1 pieces and 3 t-shirts.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I think that your photos are beautiful. Your website is gorgeous, and I mean, so I think so are your clothes. And that's interesting that you say that, because a photo is really important in the digital age. And I mean, it was important before, but it's a different experience. You know, everybody, even with Facebook advertising or Google, and that's true. I mean, 3.5 years ago was early on. Now it's, you know, you're trying to clear the path. You're trying to figure out what's working, and it's just a different world out there that's constantly changing.
Yeah. And I would actually say that it's a lot more saturated now. So, you know, about a year ago, I hired a publicist to help out Petit Couture, and quite honestly, it was just getting too unwieldy. It takes time to do that, and to force things, and, you know, to make sure that you've got all the editorial characters and all that. It takes a lot of time. And I was able to get 2 covers that way. So got a parenting cover, and then a Hudson Childrenswear review cover, which was a trade magazine.
Right, so that's pretty impressive. What results did you see from that?
You know, hard to say, quite honestly. I received a lot of industry kudos, which was great. There were a couple of sales from retailers that saw it on the wholesale side of life. And then I got some direct orders through it as well. But PR is not something that you can do once or twice, and getting a cover, that's all great. And it felt really good. It felt like I was validated, like my dress was loved, and that was great. It was the same piece. It's actually the Simone Pleat dress that's in back of me. Yeah. And that's great, because that's been kind of my cornerstone silhouette, and it's a piece that I designed by myself. And so it was very, you know, I was very validated.
Right, that's great. Yeah, you brought it to life.
PR is something that you have to do it has to be continual. And so, you know, it's just a process.
Right. So that's interesting. So you had a publicist. You said you used Twitter and Facebook. Did you ever do paid advertising through anything?
You know, I tested out doing some paid advertisement with Facebook, and that was only to garner more likes and views within my Petit Couture page.
Okay.
And at the time, I was doing a lot more blogging than I am now. I've been woefully horrible at that in the last 7 months. But I was doing a lot more blogging, and really, my blog approach was to give a day in the life of an entrepreneur. And, you know, on a personal note, I went through huge life changes. Quitting my, you know, very fruitful job with a paycheck to something that was done in off hours and in an industry that I was just learning about.
Right. So now you've come all this way. It's been, what, like 3 years? Mm-hmm. About? Okay. So, you know, I liked when we had talked, you had said, you had made an analogy or a distinction between a lifestyle business and a big business. And right. You consciously did this as a lifestyle business.
I did.
Yeah. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I can. So we, for one thing, we've on a personal note, our family has had a couple of moves. So we moved from Seattle to Portland, from Portland to the Bay Area, which is where we are now. While I was in Portland, I was able to get involved in the entrepreneurial community there, and kind of the angel network, if you will, so the angel fundraising kind of world. And I was able to learn a lot just about business mechanics and the fundraising process. And I got some really great consulting and counseling when I was there, just about how to structure my business and what I needed to think about, not just from a funding perspective, but gosh, I needed to put together a pro forma, which was essentially my profit and loss, you know, table, and when was I going to be profitable, and, you know, could I really end up making and selling these items and being profitable, and how many accounts did I need to sell into to start to break even. So going through that process, you know, they asked me to define, do you want a lifestyle business or do you really want to go big? And, of course, everybody wants to feel like they want to go big. But the reality was that I was funded. I was self-funding my business. I didn't have the latitude, nor did I really have the background at the time. I feel like I've got a lot more confidence and insights now, and so it's something that I continue to think about. But I didn't really have the ability to go raise money, nor did I really have a business model that really made sense for investors to invest in. I have a really low margin business that needs high volume, but that requires you to manufacture, quite honestly, overseas or to do a lot of volume domestically. And that's not the business that I'm running. And nor was I able to work around the clock and travel continually. And that's what you have to do. And so my business became a lifestyle business, which meant that I was just going to do what I did, being a mom at the same time. And it's been challenging, and it goes slower. But it's made it possible for me to still manage pickups and drop-offs with my kids and, some ballet class or their play or whatever it might be. And that's not, and they're young still, so that's the kind of the beauty of it. And they've all been involved in it, and so they all know about it, and it's great.
So, thank you for sharing that. I felt like the lifestyle probably resonates with a lot of people that are watching and listening, and I think it's always mind-boggling. How do you actually do it? It's like you've built this successful business. I'm looking at your room that you're in right now with all of your product and everything that you've done to this point, and it's, you think, is it really possible to do? But over a span of, 3 years building and building and building, you're just continuing to build and consciously building at a slower rate based on what your business needs are and where you're at personally. And I think that as moms, I know I too, you feel an extra pressure to kind of, you probably the business person and you just wants to push it along faster and quicker, or maybe it doesn't, I'm putting words in your mouth, but you have other responsibilities that are just as important, and you need to be able to balance all of those. So.
No, it's definitely true. I think on the business side, though, what's tough, that you have to justify your hobby, right? And because it is a hobby, it's a hobby that, in my case, mostly covers itself from a financial perspective, which is great, but sometimes doesn't, which means that, I fund it, I write a check. Luckily, that's not as much as it was in the beginning. But the going slow part is really challenging sometimes because, I don't make every market date. But luckily, I've established some relationships with some buyers, especially online buyers through some of like Zulili's and Topsy's and some newer ones like Open Sky, some other ones that, push through volume. And it's great. So it's not as kind of sexy as going to market and meeting all of the bigger buyers. And I have shown my line to Saks and Bloomingdale's and Neiman and Nordstrom and Barnes. So they've all seen it, and feedback was, we really like it. You need to work on some things, which is, I was so fortunate to have really early feedback. And it's great. And so I still continue to work on those items. But I do think that it's not really, I think businesses like this, it really is just about perseverance and establishing your credibility that way. Because I feel like it is a rare occasion when you hear of a lifestyle brand that's an overnight success. I can't think of one off the top of my head. There are no Instagrams in our world, Right. So it's a much different business.
Right. So what did tell me a little bit difference. I want to talk to you a little bit about, you are in retail stores. I want to talk to you about how you got into those retail stores, how you found sales reps, and then also the difference, like you got this feedback from the corporate stores. What did they have to say? What was the big takeaway from that?
Sure. So, early on my heart was just set, and all I wanted to be in Nordstrom and Neiman and, Saks. Like, those were the guys that I wanted. Completely unrealistic out of the gate. But because I have some business knowledge, I was able to have some conversations with them. And they loved the design aesthetic. They love silhouettes. They love the point of view of my collection, and that it's kind of classic and timeless. And conservative is not the right word because it's almost a negative connotation, but it's classic children's wear. It's not trend-based. But I have to work on fabrication, which is something that I'm doing. So I'm experimenting more with voiles, which are more fluid cotton. They have to have a really soft hand for children's wear, especially luxury. So it's just all about soft and flowy. And there are things that work, right? There's types of products that work in selling channels. So that's what I'm doing. But I went to market, to back up. I went to my first market, E&K, about a year and a half ago, and showed the collection in New York. And there, a lot of different buyers saw it. So all the big buyers walked by, saw it, got some good feedback from the Nordstrom team. And then I was able to cover the cost of my trip because a couple of boutiques picked it up. And they basically bought the entire line, which was great. Wow. And it was mostly my little skirts and sweaters and the dresses and a couple of owl signature pieces that were picked up.
Okay. What is the process of going to market? Like when you decided you were going to market, what did you need to have in order to go to market?
Sure. So it's an event, and so it's a trade show like a lot of shows. And so what you need to do is you need to figure out what booth space is going to be, how big it's going to be, whether or not you can afford to decorate it, because everything costs money. And it's all union in New York, which means that it's even more expensive. So I basically designed the space pretty leanly, and I got a couple of fixtures, and that just and some couple of grid wall systems, which are essentially those slats that you can hang things on. Made better use of the space, so I could actually merchandise things a lot more efficiently. And then, you ship all your pieces to your hotel, which is where I shipped it. I didn't ship it to the event, but I shipped all the pieces to the hotel. I bought mannequins, so you can see a mannequin display in back of me. I created collateral, which were essentially all the sales of order forms, line sheets, which are essentially the wholesale orders or forms that retailers pick up that you can essentially see what the swatches are, what the silhouettes are, and what your cost structure is. At wholesale, business cards, like any collateral that you can kind of think of. Okay. And kind of sign it.
Okay, and then how many people, so you said E&K, what is that particular show known for?
E&K is a huge trade fair that's in New York, and they do a lot of different things. But the children's show, there are, I want to say 4 of them throughout the year, and ours was at Javits Center, so it was gigantic. Everybody is there. And everyone shops it, from little boutiques to online retailers to the biggies. They all walk the show and over a course of 3 days. And you stand around and get to know your neighbors really well, and sometimes if you make friends with the retailer right next door to you, or the manufacturer or designer right next door to you, they'll send people over to you, and that was what happened in my case. It's a really lovely brand referred people over to me just to see it and to get visibility for the brand. And I got really, really tremendous feedback. But it takes probably 3 or 4 shows before you're really booking volume, because they need to make sure that you're going in business. Yeah. So I was really lucky that I was actually able to cover costs.
Yeah, no, that's great. So the boutiques that pick it up then you start establishing relationships with those boutiques. And how does it work? Like, do they want to buy a minimum? Do you have to have a minimum line, or?
Usually, you can write what your terms are, but to be quite frank, I feel like you just do what it takes. And that's just kind of the first rule of customer service regardless. Mm-hmm. And so if people didn't want to buy the minimum, that's fine. I was going to make it work. But usually they'll pick up a couple of looks in a size run. And for a toddler line, a size run is generally size 2 to 6. Sometimes they want up to size 12, depending on what their store is. And then for the infant line, it's usually, 3 to 6 months up to 18 to 24 months.
Let me ask you a little bit. So then did you at some point hire sales reps, or what is that relationship like?
Yeah, so you typically do. And like I said, I kind of taught myself and I modeled some of my favorite brands. And so I saw, gosh, if you want to buy wholesale, how are they selling it? And then I would see, oh, they've got all these distributors or reps that are in, typically they're representatives in the Northwest, the West Coast, which is LA, Dallas, the Midwest, which is Chicago, Atlanta, and New York. And so those are your basic market centers in the U.S. And then you've got international distributors and like a lot of other things there. And so I just started calling reps and then showing them my line. It was pretty nascent at first, and unfortunately I learned a very good lesson. I was associated with a very, very bad rep. And in fact, there's a lot of litigation against this person at this point, but I didn't really trust my instincts about personality and taste. And so you kind of have to go with your gut, and if your collection isn't ready for their showroom, that's okay. So you just kind of build slowly. It's better than being aligned with somebody that isn't super reputable, and unfortunately there are a lot of them.
So what does that mean? What did this person do or not do?
Unfortunately, this person, even though we had written in a contract that the samples were owned by Petit Couture and all of these other things, I never did get them back. It would just cost me more to litigate than to just chalk it up as a loss.
Yeah.
But it hurt. It stung because, that was a baby.
Right. So how do you decide, at what point would you decide to get a sales rep? Is this something like, did you do this further on down the road once you were a little bit more established, or?
I did it probably I did it about a year and a half in. So I found, and I still have a sales rep in Atlanta, I had one in LA, and then one in Dallas for a while. And so you basically get them and they show them at market for you. And for wholesale, it's great because you're writing orders and you're delivering it 12, anywhere from 12 to 16 weeks later. And so you've got time to produce them. So that's the idea, is that you're able to produce after the orders are aggregated.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. So is that typical? Can manufacturers easily, how long does the manufacturing process take once you have a line established?
So mine, because it's mostly domestically produced, is 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
And the sweater knits are made in Peru, and that's like on a month and a half cycle, just depending.
Okay.
So my production process is much smaller, but when you're going overseas to India or China or anywhere else, and for larger ones in Peru, it would be a longer lead time.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about, you've done so much within marketing and sales. What do you think has been the most helpful thing that you've done, or the most successful that you're happy with, whether it was PR or something in marketing that you did, or having sales reps?
I think the first time that somebody purchased that I didn't know was when I was so excited. I always really valued all of my friends and family support, but the first time that a stranger bought something from me was a really big deal. And I think that I'm most proud of the fact that I launched something, and that I got to creatively have a vision. And that was really great. There are a lot of things that could be better, and it's, like I said, it's a process. Just take on as much as you can at any given time.
Great. So what does the future hold for Petit Couture?
I'm still working on pieces, and so the goal is to have some new pieces out for next spring and summer. So I'm kind of skipping fall because we're in the sales time frame right now for that market. And so in the next fall, I'll have some pieces out for spring and summer for wholesale.
That's exciting. That's very exciting. So I will have one more question for you, and then we can wrap up. So what is, one personal trait that you think is the most important for entrepreneurs?
Well, I think tenacity is super key. I have learned so much through this process. I also think that you have to have a certain level of kind of blind enthusiasm for your idea, because nobody's going to love it as much as you do, and especially when the times get tough, which they mostly are when you're starting, you got to really love it in order to stick with it, because it's hard, and it's hard. Your ego takes bruising. I don't know how many times I've been told no, or this or that, or it's tough. I think the thing that really surprised me too was that I launched our first website 2 years ago, and sold some pieces through it, and some random person wrote me kind of a really disparaging note about the brand. It wasn't really couture, and it was so personal. And at that point, I realized that I really had a business, and I hadn't really thought about it. It's like, oh my gosh, this is what happens when you really have a business. And so it's kind of, I felt validated because I was doing something right, but at the same time it hurt because it's personal, and they don't know that I'm one person, sitting on the other end. And that's kind of the great part of it. And so I think it's tenacity and enthusiasm, but I also think you have to be realistic about what you can do and take on, because it's really easy to get ahead of yourself. And I've definitely made some of those mistakes.
Well, it sounds like you're doing a lot of things right, so good luck in the future.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for sharing your story. You've been very candid, and I appreciate it. I think it's very informative, and people are really going to appreciate it. I'm going to put up on the site as well, where you could be found, but if this turns into a podcast, Petit Couture can be found online at www.petitcouture.com. And for our viewers and listeners, if you like what you heard today, please subscribe to our monthly newsletter so we can make you aware of future interviews. I promise I won't spam you. And if you're interested in being interviewed, please contact me at Rachel, R-A-C-H-E-L, at bestmomproducts.com. Thank you, and until next time.
Thanks, Rachel.
All right,
Bye.
Bye.